It's getting crazy out here, folks. People all over the world are at each other's throats. We are living through some very divisive times. But I do know of one topic that brings everyone together. Religious people and atheists, crazies and intellectuals, Republicans and Democrats, men, women, children alike. There's one topic that brings everyone together, and that topic is, of course, aliens. Now, when you think about aliens, one of the first stories that comes to mind is the story of the Roswell incident, and rightfully so. The Roswell story is probably the biggest UFO story ever, and the Roswell story is what really kicked off all of this interest and discussion in aliens and UFOs. However, the Roswell story became so big that it kind of overshadowed a lot of other alleged UFO crashes that happened in the years after. And let's just say, I think there may be a reason why they like to talk about Roswell so much, because the more you talk about Roswell, the less you talk about all of these other stories, many of which are even crazier than Roswell. So I think that maybe there's just a reason behind why all of this focus was put on one story when you had similar situations happening in the years after. But a lot of people these days view these UFO stories that took place in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and they view them as old news because so much has happened since then. They're having open conversations about UFOs in Congress. You got whistleblowers coming forward, but in my opinion, in order for us to understand what's happening today, first we must understand what happened yesterday. And what I mean by that is that we still don't have answers really for Roswell and all of these other incidents. And they took place 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago. Still, no answers for those situations. So what makes you think we're going to get an answer for something that's currently happening today when we've waited an entire lifetime and we still don't have answers for things that happened decades ago? So I think it's important, especially in the modern day with the technology we have, the ability to, gather all of this information. I think we should still be looking for answers for answers to questions and things that happened in the past. And that's the only way we're going to reach a point where we could fully understand what's happening in the present. And if you think that these stories from the 50s and stuff, if you think that's old news, well, guess what? What if I were to tell you that government officials don't think those stories are old news? What if I were to tell you that members of government are still having conversations about these events? And what if I told you that I had the text messages to prove it? You would probably think I'm lying. But I actually have just that, because text messages have leaked of government officials talking about these past events. Let's go ahead and dive in and find out what's going on here. Secret UFO crash 6 years after Roswell, still of concern to U.S. intelligence officials, leaked text reveal. Roswell was just the beginning. The 1947 UFO incident that rocked a small city in New Mexico and shocked the world was followed by a less famous but perhaps even more damning event 6 years later, with recently leaked government text appearing to shed new light on the night in question. In the partially redacted communication shared on social media, a top-ranking intelligence official notes that the public would be slack-jawed to know the entire truth. The information revealed appears to validate a long-standing urban legend in the city of Kingman, Arizona, a Route 66 pit stop, one state to the west, where locals have spent nearly 3/4 of a century retelling the story of a 1953 crash. Multiple onlookers reportedly saw at least one UFO go down on May 21st, just outside the small Mojave Desert city located 100 miles away from Las Vegas. It's very rare to have multiple witnesses, multiple sources of information confirming an incident like this. Preston Dennett, author of UFOs over Arizona, A True History of Extraterrestrial Encounters in the Grand Canyon State, recently told local news Channel 12. In a previous interview with AZ Central, Dennett called the occurrence one of the best UFO crashes in the United States. A local institution, the Mojave Museum of History and Arts, even boasts an exhibit on the crash, which locals and more recently podcasters have been trying to get to the bottom of for years. Bigger than Roswell? Harry Drew is one of these locals. The area historian created a documentary on the extraterrestrial mystery a number of years back. Drew told News Now that witnesses described seeing 8 UFOs, also called unidentified aerial phenomena, in the night sky. They saw 8 UFOs in the night sky, engaged in what appeared to be some kind of a battle. Ultimately, he said, 3 crafts went down. The crash occurred around the same time as a nearby Nevada nuclear test series codenamed Operation Upshot Knothole, declassified military documents show. Consistent with other global sightings of UFOs near spike points of radiation, an atomic bomb was detonated 2 days ahead of the incident, according to the report. During the night in question, one craft was burned up when it collided with a mountain. Another was found somewhat intact in the desert with no real damage, and a third crash landed near a small reservoir, which the military and a team of scientists camped around to recover, Drew claims. Although most of the researcher's theory has been debated in the UFO world, he also believes experimental radar brought the crafts down. Dennett corroborates a military response of 40 officials to one of the sites. The object was described as metallic, 30 feet wide, 3.5 feet high, oval-shaped with portholes. Inside were 2 to 4 4-foot-tall humanoids, deceased according to most sources, with large eyes and wearing metallic suits. The pilot appeared to have died in the crash. In the many years to follow, Dennett has traced the incident through old reports and government documents. He uncovered a frequent code name used for the scientist Fritz Werner. We now know him to be Arthur Stancil, Dennett said. It was Stancil's job to basically determine the speed of this object as it came down based upon the gog it made in the soil. And he estimated it was about 1,200 miles per hour. The project was top secret. Scientists arrived on a blacked out bus so they wouldn't even know where they were. Air Force Colonel impressed the importance of staying quiet to the group. However, 20 years later, Stancil signed an affidavit confirming his presence at the mystery site. Dennett claims the government took the craft into secret custody, according to information of a claim revealed 50 years after the fact. These craft are scooped up, and then they're taken to various Air Force bases, scientific labs, and studied intently to figure out what we can figure out about how they work, he said. And while this may all seem like an excellent plot for a sci-fi thriller, the eye-raising reports appear to be further legitimized after a former intelligence officer recently went public with a text conversation that he had with a senior government official in 2020. Here's some of the messages right here. Blank and I are making huge progress getting into the CR program. He plans to meet with you at some point. The blank would be slack-jawed if they found out what we know. Right now, we haven't gone that far back. We're dealing with the recovered UAP that landed in Kingman, Arizona in the 50s. We're vacuuming up info as blank gets read in. We now know the management structure and security control systems and ownership of the CR. We also know who recovers, landed, or crashed UAPs under what authorities. We also know that a still highly classified memo by a secretary of the U.S. Air Force in the 1950s is still in effect to maintain the cover on UAPs. We know that SES-2, who's the Air Force gatekeeper. Blank and I are making huge progress. The conversation between Christopher Mellon, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, and the source, the high-ranking government official, said people would be slack-jawed to learn what the government actually knows of the incident. The government also knows who recovers crashed UAPs, under what authorities. The other shocker, the feds are still dealing with the Kingman incident. We're vacuuming up info. The partially redacted conversation reads, we also know that a still highly classified memo by a secretary of the United States Air Force is still in effect to maintain the cover on UAPs. So, some people, they like to treat these old stories as if this is old news. But you see, with the modern day advancements in technology, with the information, and just the equipment and stuff that we have now, with the capabilities that we have now, we're now able to learn a lot more about these UFOs. We're able to learn more than we did, or we could, back in 1947 and 1956 and, the 50s and 60s. So in many ways, a lot of these old UFO stories are still new stories, because we're just now getting around to the point where we could actually, kind of somewhat do tests on these things. We're just now, decades later, figuring stuff out about this equipment and about these UFOs that have been found. So it's crazy to know that we got all of these other news stories going on, right? And what I mean is, we got all of these other new UFO stories going on. There's a new UFO alien story every couple of weeks, every couple of months. So think about how much backed up stuff these people have to look into. Think about that. They're still trying to figure out stuff that happened in the 1950s. When are they going to make it to stuff that happened in 2024? You get what I'm saying here? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not naive. I know that they know a lot more than what they're willing to say, and they probably know a lot more than what they revealed in these text messages. And there's a possibility that these text messages leaked for a reason, because maybe they want us to believe that they're still trying to really figure out what's going on as well. Maybe they know all of this stuff. Maybe they're not even looking into these stories from the past anymore, because they already know everything. But they want us to believe that, hey, we're still looking into stuff from the 50s. We don't know what's going on. That's a possibility as well. But regardless of what the possibilities are, we could talk about the possibilities all day. The reality is that this is further confirmation that aliens exist, that UFOs exist, that the government knows about it, that they've been working on recovering these craft, reverse engineering these crafts for years, well before me and most likely you all were even alive. Okay? So really let that sink in. That before I was alive, before most of you all were alive, the U.S. government was not only aware that aliens and UFOs were real, but they already had some in their possession. And if we're to believe what's being stated here, still to this day, they're running tests, and they're still trying to get to the bottom of, how a lot of these things work. But for now, let me know what you think down in the comments below. While you're down there, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe, ring that notification bell, and I'll talk to you all in the next one.